Welcome to F1 Coffee Corner, Full Beans. I'm your host as always, Terry, and I'm here to keep you up to date with all of the unbiased, hard-hitting Formula 1 news. So grab your favourite mug of coffee, sit down, strap in and get yourself comfortable to join in the conversation. Because this is F1 Coffee Corner. This is Full Beans, the must-have podcast for all Formula 1 fans. Welcome to F1 Coffee Corner, Full Beans the podcast, and this is your Imola preview show. So what have I got in store for you on this week's episode? We're going to be taking a look back at the news headlines that have dominated the Formula 1 paddock since the last time out in Miami and our podcast last week. We're going to be looking ahead to the updates that the teams are going to be bringing to Imola. We've got confirmation from some of the teams, some we don't know about, but we are expecting a absolutely huge amount of updates to arrive at the track for this weekend, with the start, of course, of the European legs of the Formula 1 calendar. And then finally, in the takeaway section, we're going to be previewing Imola, looking ahead to what the tyre strategy is going to be, what the tyre compounds are, track changes that have come into play, and just some other bits and pieces around what we can expect from Imola this weekend out. So, all what's left to say is, I'm Terry. This is the F1 Coffee Corner. If you haven't already, please do me a favour, hit that like, subscribe, follow button, whatever's available to you on the platform you're listening to. And let's sit down, strap in, and give this week's episode some full beans. Grab your coffee. Let's go. Okay, first up is the Espresso News. Now, for those who are new to the podcast, this is where I take my daily news headlines from the past week, go through them all, elaborate on a bit more, and just keep you up to date with what is going on in the world of Formula 1. Now, first up, we've got Haas and their legal action. Now, I can't remember on last week's podcast if I talked about Gunther Steiner's legal action against Haas or not. So we just cover them both off. But basically, Gunther Steiner has launched a legal action against Haas for what he's saying is infringement of his rights. So that's selling his merchandise with his name on it, cashing on his name, still having stuff on the website bearing his face, since obviously he departed from the Haas team over the winter period. Now, what's happened here is Haas have now launched a separate legal action against Gunther Steiner for alleged trademark infringements in his book, his autobiography, Surviving to Drive. Couple of things on this one. This is quite clearly two people who just can't agree on something. I think that Gene and Gunther just need to sit down and thrash this one out, because obviously when the book was released, he was at Haas and they would have known what he used in the book and what infringements he so-called, have broken. And it just seems like this is just Gene Haas just being petty over Gunther's one. However, Gunther is owed money from his time with Haas, and it's all just getting a little bit messy in terms of how it's played out in court. Now, I don't know who stands to win this one or not. It remains to be seen. But yeah, I think this is just one where they just need to sit down in a room together and just iron it all out and just move on from this. I mean, the team's performing well, obviously, since the changeovers. Gunther's going off to do other things, so maybe it's just time to draw a line under the sand and just, sort of forget about this one. But yeah, Haas have now launched a countersuit against Gunther Steiner, who launched a suit against Haas. So, remains to be seen what happens on that one. Helmut Marco says it's really lucky that Cheko didn't take Max out in Miami first corner, as that would have been a Waterloo moment. I can't even imagine how that contract negotiation for Cheko would have gone if he had torpedoed Max out of the Miami Grand Prix. I'm pretty sure it wouldn't have gone very well at all. Let's be honest about it. So yeah, obviously we all saw what happened. Cheko almost took Max out like Danny Kvyat style, and it wouldn't have gone down well. However, bottom line is he didn't. Everyone survived to fight another day in terms of the Miami Grand Prix, and Checo's contract renewal is, as far as I know, still on the table. So luckily for him, he didn't actually make contact. But yeah, Visa Cashapp RB will become the latest team to run recycled carbon fibre with their Imner updates. So apparently this is 85% of the molds they're using is made from recycled carbon fibre. There's obviously an environmental reason for doing this, but there's also a cost cut reason for doing this as well. So obviously their latest team, we saw, I think it was McLaren, who were the first to openly come out and talk about this last year. I know they've just released their study on all of their recycling environmental projects and things. So it looks like Visa Cashapp RB have got onto the same sort of page. It's a cost cap saving. Why wouldn't you do it? And their latest team to use it in terms of recycled carbon fibre. But I believe it's on the moulds that they use to produce the parts, not the actual parts themselves. We've got McLaren team principal Andrea Stella reckons the DRS zone at the Miami Grand Prix was short. It was a bit short, to be honest. More than likely, it was more to do with the tailwind there as well. There was a big tailwind, especially in that second DRS zone, and I think that was certainly impacting on the effect of that DRS zone. But I think Andreas Steller's probably commenting on the fact of, if you remember, Lando being stuck behind Cheko and couldn't get past him, even though his car, evidently had more pace. He just couldn't get past Cheko. So I think that's what he's alluding to with that comment there, probably based on, getting the hold up with Cheko defending like he did. So Checo's deploying that energy that he had saved up to counteract Lando's DRS. Hulkenberg says that Komatsu forcing gave everything to keep him at Haas for 2025. As we know, Hulkenberg is going to Audi, multi-year deal, lots of opportunities for him. He's saying that, it's nothing the team's done. Komatsu did all he could to try and convince them that Haas was the right team to stay at. And it's just a choice that Audi gives him better options. I understand where he's coming from. When we think back to a couple of years ago, Hulkenberg was pretty much out of Formula One, and think that he's one of the ones secure for 2025 must be certainly a weight off his shoulders, that's for sure. Jensen Button says that Carlos Sainz doing the right thing, looking for a competitive seat now, rather than potentially waiting 3 to 4 years for Audi to get up to speed. This is in regards to, obviously, the rumours about Red Bull and Mercedes. I don't think that Red Bull's an option for Carlos Sainz, if I'm honest. I think Mercedes is still an option. Interestingly, that some would argue is that competitive at the moment, but it's probably more competitive than being in a Sauber next year is probably where I would go with that one. And what Jensen's saying is, while he's at the top of his game, driving well, his reputation is intact, that maybe a move to a bigger team than what Sauber is going to be next year would be more beneficial than waiting for the Audi project to get on board. So obviously Nico Hulkenberg is okay doing that. What Jensen's suggesting is that maybe Carlos might want to do another move before that one. We've got Ferrari's HP deal worth $100 million per year, which obviously matches Oracle's Red Bull deal. Also includes supply computers, tech equipment, and also 3D printers to Ferrari at Maranello, as well as being trackside as well. I imagine there's a cost cap saving to this. I don't know the details on this one. It's not something that gets published on Formula One, so it's quite hard to monitor and keep track of. But from what I can gather, I'm pretty sure there'd be a cost cap saving to being donated your computer equipment by your sponsor, which no one can argue beyond that when it's within the rules, quite evidently. So that's obviously what's happened with HP as well. In terms of HP being the title sponsors, obviously Scuderia Ferrari HP, in case you didn't know, they've got 1 or 2 logos on that Ferrari. But I suppose if you're paying $100 million a year and donating computer equipment, you can put as many logos on a Formula One car as you want to, really. Formula One bosses united in agreements that the points system should be changed, with the Formula One Commission set to resume talks on the proposals. I've seen 2 proposals on this. I agree with one, I don't agree with the other one. So I've seen one that takes you down to 12th place and maybe has a tweak at the top in terms of making it a bit more competitive. I've also seen one that takes you all the way down to finishing the Grand Prix. I'm not a fan of that one. I think that points should still be earned. So I think 12th place is enough. But I do feel that going down to that one, it would be better 12th place, not all the way down to the bottom. Now, the Formula One Commission have got a pretty easy job on their hands. Ultimately, when the Formula One team bosses agree on something, it normally goes through, which is a bonus for them. The FIA are obviously pushing this because they get points, they get paid per point. So the FIA are probably really keen to see this one go all the way and more points being added to the Formula One grid, because ultimately it means their bank balance is going to get healthier. So I certainly don't see any resistance to this. From what I'm seeing, it's more of a case of finding a format that fits for all of the teams and making it still a bit fairer. We got Visa Cashapp RB back in the news with their team principal, Lauren Mecki, saying that Yuki Tsunoda has made a huge step in performance this season. I'd agree with that. I think Yuki's maturing as a driver. He's starting to talk a bit more about the possibility of Aston Martin in 2026. He talked this week about how potentially he would like to go there with Honda supporting him, but there would obviously have to be a seat vacant for him. I still fully expect that. I've said many times on this podcast, I don't believe for 1 minute Honda have given Aston Martin exclusive use of their Honda engine and not asked for a seat in return. So I'm still fully expecting that one. I think that's when we see Lance Stroll go off to do other things. We've got Juan Pablo Montoya says that Max would be completely stupid to leave Red Bull when they're winning everything and doesn't see a move happening. I agree with Montoya on this one. I'm not quite sure why Max would move unless that 2026 engine that he knows something we don't know about and that Ford partner powertrain just isn't up to scratch, because that's the only reason I can see Max making a move. And even then, I can still see him seeing this season and next season out, because why would he move now when Red Bull are still pretty much dominating the sport? I know, obviously McLaren last time out, and with the updates we talk about, hopefully the pack will get a bit closer, but realistically Red Bull is still a team to beat, and a move is only likely to be Mercedes, it looks like, in Formula One, or Aston Martin, I suppose, money-wise, are the only two teams who can really compete. We know that all the other teams have got their drivers locked down, so with a move to one of those two, he's not realistically going to be challenging more than what he is at Red Bull, so I can't see that one happening either, to be honest. We've got Miami organisers say that demand for this year's race was as high as ever, despite fears that Vegas could change that, with a sellout 275,000 weekend crowd. This was a big concern with diluting the market in the States with so many Grand Prix. Obviously, we're touched on Chicago in a second. But yeah, they had fears that with Vegas coming on board, it might actually damage Miami as a whole package. It doesn't look like that. They had record viewing in terms of America for Formula One. I can't remember what it is. I'm pretty sure it was 3.2 million from 2.7 million, but I'm not entirely 100% accurate on these figures off the top of my head. But yeah, the viewing figure was most they've had for Formula One. It was actually a good race in terms of getting someone else win a race for the marketing point of view. I'm sure everyone from the marketing team at Formula One is delighted that we've got a different winner, even though they probably won't admit it in public. It's always good for the sport for a shot in the arm, and it always kind of G's everything up in terms of the fan engagement as well. So that would have helped as well. We've then got Christian Horner says that signing Adrian Newey could be very complicated due to the cost cap restriction. I'm not sure I agree with Christian on this one, because surely anybody who takes Adrian Newey on board would just ask him what Red Bull did in terms of his contract and match it. Whatever Red Bull did, they could obviously afford to have Pierre Boche and Adrian Newey on board, so I imagine they would just do exactly the same. So I'm not sure I agree with Christian on that one, that's for sure. We've also got reports from out of Germany that Audi have decided to let both Bottas and Joe go, as they've now taken over the team and all appointments ready for their entry in 2026. So Audi are now calling the shots. We know that Nico Hulkenberg's gone. We know there's one seat vacant. And we also know that things like Bottas' race engineer change has happened. It doesn't look like Joe and Bottas are safe at Sauber at all. They need to be doing some shopping around. Valtteri Bottas was very open in the press conference. He said that he's talking to 4 or 5 teams, some more advanced than others, but he was out there and he was talking to people, and that actually it was certainly not a given that he was going to stay with Sauber when his contract ends at the both of this year. Both drivers, of course, are out of contract at the end of the 2024 season. Chicago, let's touch on that one. So yesterday there was a tweet that was put out. It wasn't backed up with any sources, any facts. When I had a look at it, the first thing I noticed, it wasn't quoted any sources, so that kind of got the alarm bells ringing. And also, when big news comes out and I've not even heard a whisper of it, it kind of makes me go, are you sure about that one? So yeah, that one got tweeted that it was imminent. It was due to be on the calendar for 2026, and it was only weeks away from being signed. That is not the case at all. That tweet was later taken down. Unfortunately, what happens when one of these tweets go up, it gets retweeted, it gets quoted, it gets screenshotted, it gets sent all the way around, and invariably the apology that follows it never has as much traction as the original one, and that's what's happened in this case. So there are still a lot of talk about the Chicago Grand Prix going ahead, but from what I'm led to believe and from what I've seen and what I've read and a couple of people I've spoken to, Chicago is an option currently for Formula One. They're talking to Formula One, but then so are plenty of other places such as New York, London, and has had conversations in the past. So there are lots of people having conversations with Formula One about the potential to bring a race to their city. And this is no different to that one. But it's not, I repeat, not going ahead as of such at the moment. Logan Sargent insists he's not being distracted by talk of Williams, replacing him with Kimi Antonelli. Another rumour being put to bed, which when I certainly didn't jump on board of, is Kimi Antonelli replacing Logan Sargent at Imler. I said from the start this wasn't going to happen. That looks pretty much confirmed now because we're not hearing any news of that. The FIA haven't even met about his super licence, so I'm glad that one's been put to bed completely and done and dusted. Paddy Lowe, back in the news article, quite clearly he's done a interview with somebody because it's about 2 or 3 quotes I've seen now from Paddy Lowe. So he says Mercedes faces very difficult recovery back to the top after taking wrong turns with their development. So he talks openly about the cost cap, how in the past Mercedes would have spent their way out of trouble, but they can't do that. They've made some wrong choices in terms of development, and they're now behind, and they're now paying the price for that, and they can't claw that development back because obviously they're tied into the cost cap and can no longer do it. So yeah, it's interesting one. That one is. We've got Helmut Marco saying that Max believes his floor damage wasn't that serious, and the fact that they were slower than McLaren in Miami. This is an interesting story from the Miami Grand Prix that's come out. I touched on it in my podcast, but Lando obviously won the Grand Prix. He had better pace. He had better pace before the safety car, before Max hit the bollard as well. He was lapping about 0.4 seconds on, older mediums at the time, and he was rapidly gaining in terms of his pace and getting faster and faster. Max obviously hit the bollard. Christian came out afterwards and said there was damage to the floor. There was. We've all seen the pictures. We've seen the video footage as he goes over the stump. The damage comes out the back, but ultimately Max is saying it wasn't enough to affect performance. Helmut Marco is backing him up, but Christian's told us it did. So it's one of those, isn't it? Ultimately, at the end of the day, Lando won, didn't he? So Charles Leclerc has got a new race engineer in Brian Bozzo as Xavi moves to another role. So no more we are checking at Ferrari. I wonder what Brian's going to bring to the role in terms of a catchphrase for Plan C or Plan D. But yeah, we are checking. Xavi is now checking something else outside of Formula One. Still with Ferrari. In terms of Ferrari, made some key appointments from Mercedes. So 2 key appointments. So they got a new deputy manager and into the engineering as well for that one. So D'Ambrosio and Lucky has gone across. So really big names for Ferrari and getting people on board. So yeah, it's a good move for them. They've obviously negotiated. It was talked about. I certainly talked about it a while back. They've obviously been negotiating the release of those 2 key figures. Fred Vasseur once again recruiting very strongly at Ferrari. Ollie Behrman will be in free practice 1 in Imola for Haas in his rookie session. Obviously, even though he's doing for Ferrari, still qualified for the rookie session. I believe he's down to do 6 apparently this year, so he's certainly going to get a lot of experience, as we all expect Ollie Behrman to be named as a Haas driver as well. Red Bull are going to unveil the RB17 hypercar project that Adrian Newey is obviously finishing his Red Bull career, finishing off. That's going to be launched at the Goodwood Festival of Speed for all of those who are going. Esteban Ocon says Alpine shouldn't be celebrating their point too hard after their last time out. Ferrari tested in their Imner update. We'll come on to that one in a second. That's all I've got for the Express News. There's nothing else really that's kind of, actually, FIA breaking news. I remember this one. So, yeah, the FIA's chief executive has quit. So how could I forget that one since we last did the podcast? So, yeah, Natalie Robin was the chief executive of the FIA, the first person in the role, and the FIA had never had a chief executive before, and she has now quit. We're waiting for it to be ratified at the next meeting of the World Motorsport Council, because these things have to get ratified by them, but it's certainly been sort of rubber stamped. It's going, it's happening. The statement I read out, where it's a very mutual statement, mutual consent, thanking her for all of her efforts, wishing her well for the future. Very generic, I would say, from Mohammed Ben Sulayem in terms of the reasons behind she's leaving. There seems to be a bit of a power play that's played out from what led to believe, and it seems that the stuff that she wanted to change hasn't been able to do so. So yeah, she's the latest in a number of high profile people to quit the FIA, to be honest, over the past few months. So the FIA needs to really have a look at what they're doing. They could, of course, be getting their house in order. It could actually be that since John Todd and previous FIA presidents, that actually Mohammed Ben Sulayem is actually taking a brush through it. Not a lot of people are seeing it as that from the outside, so it will be really interesting to see exactly what he's doing with these key roles and what's going on there. We know that there's a lot of pressure from him from outside sources to the FIA, but we've also seen a lot of support for him from sources within the FIA. So he's someone who they certainly are backing in terms of the members, who obviously are the ones who vote to keep him as president. So whatever the public and sort of Formula One's opinion on the FIA president may be, it doesn't look like the members are in any rush to relieve him of duties anytime soon, unless, of course, something legally happens and he has to be. So, yeah, that's pretty much it for the Espresso News. And we'll come on to the coffee chat, which is going to be updates for Imola. Stay tuned. Okay, Imola updates. So this is going to be massive this week. The start of the European leg. A lot of teams have been holding off for their updates. Some teams brought some forward, as we'll touch on in a minute, but predominantly, virtually every team should be bringing an update of some sort to Imner if they haven't already recently introduced one. So we don't know a lot until sort of Friday. Friday, we get the update list, and this week it will feature obviously in the Tech Corner. Shameless plug for that article. So before every Grand Prix, I write Finance Tech Corner, where I pick out all of the top technical updates and I go in depth on them. And that article gets published over on Finance. So check that one out if you get a chance. There's all the other previous ones loaded on there if you want to have a look at what updates have come so far this season. And really enjoy writing it on there. So yeah, look out for that one this week because it's going to be a big one, that's for sure. Now, in terms of updates, like I say, some teams have kind of given us an idea of what's going on. A lot of teams haven't. So let's hit Sauber first. Sauber fans will be relieved to know not only have they got updates, they have a fix for that long-awaited pit stop problems they've been having with the nut getting shredded and cross-threaded. So they have that equipment arriving. They've confirmed that. They've also got some updates on the car. So Sauber might just be ready to make a leap up in terms of performance. We know that Alpine obviously brought the new floor over the last 2 races. They brought it for one driver and then the second driver in Miami and started getting points. So they'd be glad of that one. So Alpine, we haven't heard what updates they are due to bring, whether or not that floor that they brought was an Imler update forward or whether or not it was the start of a bigger package. So it remains to be seen on that one. But certainly Sauber will welcome any updates, I'm sure, and will certainly welcome, hopefully, what will be a sub 10-second pit stop in terms of what they've been doing. They've been going down as far as 7, I think 6, 7, but still it's not good enough and it kills your strategy, doesn't it? So the other big update news, Mercedes are going to bring the second part of their Miami update. So in Miami, they introduced a new front wing, they introduced a new front suspension, and a new jagged floor edge. Now, the rest of the update is going to arrive in Miami. So they brought it forward. The rest of the update is going to arrive in Imola, That was the update that arrived in Miami, which they brought forward. So with Imola, what they're bringing is the back end of the car, basically. So the beam wing and the rear end of the car in terms of the suspension and the bodywork on that W15. So they are looking to try and cure some of the headaches they've had from the W15 that they weren't expecting. They're talking a lot about how the Miami updates have performed exactly as they wanted them to, and it's given them a good idea. I'm a bit loath to say that I believe them because we've heard this before from Mercedes. So I'm firmly in the camp of when it comes to Mercedes updates, I want to see them on the track before I comment if they've actually kind of cracked it so far, because they haven't done over the past couple of years. So it remains to be seen. But another substantial package, and over the next 3 to 4 races, the W15 is going to also be getting some more updates. So they've been waiting for this. They pulled it forward, like I said, to Miami, or at least half of it. And they're hoping that it's going to get them back towards the podiums, because this season without a podium is probably their worst performance in numerous amount of years in terms of a start to a season. So they really need something. Red Bull are going to be bringing the second part of their Japan update. So they brought a Japan update with regards to the side pods and the cooling. They're due the second part of this one in Imola. They're not talking as a big update, more of a second part of that Japan update, but they do expect it to increase performance by quite a bit, according to Helmut Marco. So Red Bull developing. There is a bit of talk. Adrian Newey did a podcast where he talks about have we reached the ceiling of development in terms of the Red Bull and how much can he extract in terms of performance from that one. So it'd be interesting to see if actually they've managed to gain a lot more, or whether the pack is closing up on Red Bull. Only time will tell. We don't know, but they are certainly arriving with updates for the RB20 for both drivers. McLaren have obviously the Miami update, which took Lando to a win. 50% of it went to Oscar's car. The other 50% is arriving for Imola. So both McLarens will be running on the updated parts that Lando won the Miami Grand Prix with. Now, Ferrari are launching their B-spec car. Ferrari have made a massive update on this one. So they've brought with them, they use their filming day. So for those who don't know, you get 200 kilometers on a filming day. They use the Friday of this FIA session that they've done. So on the Thursday, they run the 2022 car, where they run this Wheel Gods wet weather trial, which is trying to stop the spray from the tyres. So they did that one. Then on Friday, they did win their film day. So 200 kilometers in the bag, and their B-spec car, which has got a new air intake. The S-duct has been removed. It's more of a P shape on the front of that Ferrari. They've got mirror vanes that have been extended. They've got front suspension. They've got rear wing updates. They've got front and rear wing updates as well. So a massive development for Ferrari. Will it be enough to close that gap? They're talking about anywhere between 0.2 and 0.4 in terms of the gains in performance. Depends on what Red Bull and the others do, obviously, because that's no good if Red Bull then turn with an update that gives them 0.4. And that's the point. We're going to be seeing this a lot this weekend, and it could make picking teams in terms of fantasy Formula One really difficult because all these updates could cancel each other out, or there might be a surprise package in there. Talk about surprise package, we'll come on to Aston Martin. They've got updates due, but again, we haven't been told what they are. So Aston Martin are another team. They share the rear suspension of the Mercedes. So I don't know if Mercedes updates might have something to do with them in terms of that rear suspension package, gearbox package, beam wing, that kind of area of Aston Martin. I'm expecting something to be happening on those. But certainly Aston Martin over the past few weeks have kind of tailed off in terms of where they are in the pecking order. We've seen this Ferrari, we've seen this Red Bull, and we've seen this McLaren gap almost appear in that top 5 even. So they want to close that gap. Mercedes want to close that gap as well. So remains to be seen what's on that one. That's all the confirmed updates I've got. Like I said, I'm expecting most of the teams to be bringing updates with them if they haven't already. I think that list will be extensive. I think it will be long. However, will it be successful? It remains to be seen. Or will it just even itself back out in terms of the development race? And we might not see a change to the pecking order at all because they might just even each other out and cancel each other out. But that's it for your Imola updates. Looking forward to seeing what they can do on track, because there are some changes to the track which we'll come on to in the takeaway. So Imola, I am not going to attempt to pronounce the full name of the Imola Grand Prix, and I make no apologies for that. But what have we got? 4.909 kilometres, 63 laps. First Grand Prix was held there in 1980. Race distance, 309.049 kilometres, and a lap record set by Lewis Hamilton of 1 minute 15.484. We obviously didn't race there last year because of the floods and the weather forecast. I've seen lots of different ones. I've seen some saying it's going to be wet, some saying it's going to be dry, some saying that we're going to get rain before sessions. So it could make a complete cocktail in terms of what's going on. But let's consult the book and let's see what it says about Imola. So it says, the sudden surge for venues caused by global travel restrictions imposed because of COVID brought a few old favourites back onto the Formula One calendar, including, of course, Imola. And the Italian circuit has kept its place since then. Now, its contract is due to run out in a couple of years. They had a year bolted on because of what happened, obviously, last year with the complete flooding and the cancellation of the Grand Prix. So Formula One bolted that year onto their contract. I believe it's got 2 years left to run. I might be wrong, that one might only be one, but it's certainly got 2 years left. I don't think it's any more than that one. So with them and Monza kind of competing for updates, it'll be interesting to see which one the FIA choose to keep going forward and whether or not they choose that and bring another Grand Prix in somewhere else. But what does the book say? So this is a book, for those of you who don't know, Formula One 2024, Teams, Drivers, Track Records, from Bruce Jones by Wild Wet Publishing, and it gives us a really good idea of what to expect. So despite never being able to state a claim to be Italy's premier circuit, Imner has managed to stage 30 Grand Prix, largely thanks to hosting the San Marino Grand Prix, although it's not located in the Principality of San Marino. Interesting. First feeling on arriving at the circuit at the foot of the rolling hills should be one of arriving in a spring like Eden with orchards in its infield. The second, even with recent improvements to the infrastructure, is that of going back to its heyday in the 1990s when it hosted Italy's warm-up Grand Prix ahead of the real thing at Monza. Gives you an impression of what the facilities are like at Imola and one of the reasons why its future is certainly in doubt. Because of the restricted boundaries of the site, the circuit remains very much old school, doesn't have the space for modern day runoff areas. On the plus side, the racing footage looks more exciting, with landscape so close at hand, and is made better still by plenty of gradient change. The lap starts with the Tamburello chicane, of course, that the scene of that fateful accident for Roland Ratzenberger, which we're commemorating 30 years this weekend at Imola, of course, with Ayrton following the next day with his tragic accident as well. The variant Villeneuve, then the original first corner of consequence, the hairpin at Tussa. It's uphill out of here with the trap rising behind the park. A sharp left that feeds the car down. This pair of right-handers, the second tighter than the first, has to be negotiated before the trap rises sharply again for a run-up to a chicane on the crest. This is not overtaking country. It's far too light, especially in these modern Formula One cars. Dropping to the first corner and again to the second, the track levels out for a blast onto the start-finish straight, down which cars can hit 205 miles per hour in their attempts to line up an overtaking manoeuvre into, of course, that first chicane. Now, Imler has made some track changes since last time we raced there. So what they've done is turn 9, the asphalt runoff has been removed, where they've replaced it with even more gravel. Turns 11, 12 and 13, they've actually reduced the runoff area. So even though we talked about not having runoff areas, we've actually reduced them. And turns 14 and 15 have had the addition of gravel traps. So the drivers are going to have to take into account the track changes as well. Certainly when they hit free practice, it looks like it's going to be a bit more unforgiving. We know that Formula 1 cars don't like going into the gravel. It normally stalls them and stops them. So with that in mind, I imagine drivers are going to be very wary, especially of turns 9, 14 and 15 with the gravel being introduced to that one. In terms of race strategy, it's normally a one-stop strategy going around Imola. I don't normally see it being anything else, unless, of course, weather plays a part in that one. You lose about 30 seconds for a pit stop in Imola, so it doesn't really lend itself to a two-stop. Last time out, we only saw multiple pit stops because we had the rain and we were using the intermediate tyres as well. So that's my bet. No weather, normal racing conditions. I'm expecting a one-stop strategy. Now, Pirelli have brought the C3, C4, C5 compound tyres with them. So we've got the hardest compounds available to Pirelli that they selected for this weekend. So I'm not expecting to see tyres fall off as much as what we might have seen in previous races. So that's why it still lends itself to that one-stop strategy, that's for sure. But yeah, that's pretty much it on my Imner preview show. So as I said before at the beginning of the show, if you haven't already, do me a quick favour, hit that follow, like, subscribe button. Just past 7,000 on Instagram, so many thank you to all those who have followed over there, and 22,000 over on TikTok and 3,600 on Facebook. So yeah, the F1 Coffee Corner is growing steadily. It's growing at a great pace. I really appreciate all of the support. People who tune into the podcast, really appreciate that as well. I've had some lovely messages from people who are really enjoying it. Hope you're enjoying the new format of having more regular podcasts as well, since we moved over onto a different platform. And hopefully you haven't noticed a difference in terms of the viewers, or if you have, it's an enhancement to your podcast experience. So yeah, that's all I've got to say, really. Really appreciate all of the support I'm getting. In terms of me, I'm off to the F1 arcade this weekend. Dad is back from work. I'm absolutely buzzing to have a weekend with Dad. He missed Silverstone, and I know he's absolutely gutted for the Miami watch party in terms of missing that. And Formula 1 always feels a bit better when I'm watching it with Dad. So yeah, he's back this weekend. We are heading down to London to the F1 arcade as winners of the Silverstone ballot prize that we got for that one. Nigel Mansell is following the Monaco Grand Prix, so we've got an evening with Nigel Mansell coming up. Hopefully Dad's trying to get out of work, so if you're listening, Steve, who's my dad's boss, let him out of work, let him go see Nigel Mansell. I'm sure he's going to work a lot harder if he's not spray painting with you, Steve. You'll get a much more happier Chris if he's allowed out of work to come and play and watch Nigel Mansell. So just a bit of a personal message to Dad's boss there to let him out. And then I've also just won a ballot as well with Silverstone to go see Nigel Mansell again on the Thursday at the Silverstone Museum, where he launches the IndyCar collection. So yeah, 2 nights with Nigel Mansell. He's probably going to get a restraining order out and accuse me of stalking him. But hey, it's Nigel Mansell, absolute hero of mine. So I can't wait to see what that one brings up. And yeah, that's all I've got for you this week. That is my Imner preview. I will be back with Adam and Rob and the Fanamp channel. So if you head on over to the YouTube Fanamp channel 1 hour before deadline on Saturday, so that is 2 p.m, I believe, UK time. So head on over to there. That's where you'll get all of your fancy Formula picks. That's where you'll get all of your latest up-to-date news. You'll get all of the tech stuff from me, all of the latest with what we've seen from the practice sessions, and of course that all-important information on who to potentially select for your fancy Formula 1 team. So that is 2 p.m. British time on Saturday afternoon, I hope. If not, it's an hour before qualifying, but I'm pretty sure it is. I've got to check that now. Hold on. Let me check that. Otherwise, I'm going to make it easy myself on the podcast, didn't I? I was right. It was 2 p.m. So I will see you all there. That's the live stream. It's got a live chat. So drop in your fancy Formula questions into the live chat. Head on over to the Fanamp channel beforehand. Go over to the Fancy Formula page, drop in your lineup so that Adam and Rob can have a look at it before the show itself or during the show, and maybe just help you out in terms of winning some great Fancy Formula prizes or just boosting your ranking up. I'm closing in now on Adam and Rob. They don't know it yet, but I've got a plan. I've got a strategy which might just see F1 Coffee Corner beating these fantasy Formula 1 players. let's just wait and see. But without further ado, I hope you enjoy the Grand Prix this weekend, and I will catch you all on the next episode of F1 Coffee Corner, Full Beans Podcast.